Our call to worship today is modified from Drawn Together by Jennifer Leota Gray. We come together every week, bound not by a creed or a mutual desire to please one God or many gods. Yet we are drawn together by a belief that how we are in the world, who we are together, matters. We come together in the knowledge that love, not fear, can change this world.
Amazon.com lists almost 200,000 books about leadership. And if you Google leadership qualities, you get 49 million hits. Leadership is a hot topic and one that can be defined in many ways. Today, the leadership development team is focusing its worship service on a leadership topic that is not all that common. Specifically, how part of the creativity of leadership is learning from unexpected sources. The source we stumbled upon was an article from the world of Christian church leadership, itself a large and varied world. And the article listed 15 things the church could learn from Alcoholics Anonymous and all those 12-step programs that still regularly meet in church basements and fellowship halls. We were intrigued. So we've put together a service with 3 short sermons in which we each say something about the 2 to 3 things the church could learn from AA that most touched us personally. Annabel will light our chalice today for those unexpected moments and resources that make us more creative and more powerful, that we may all lead the church well and bring our leadership out into a world that desperately needs both our good news and our strong hands.
Love is the spirit of the church, and service is its calling. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Today, you'll hear about a variety of lessons that 12-step programs have for churches. I'll start now by considering 2 lessons that might surprise us, both of which have to do with leadership in important ways. The first is, there are no stars. The second is, expect resurrection. There are no stars. No matter which 12-step program we're talking about, the second word is always anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. What's so important about the anonymous business? It's a way of making sure that 12-step programs are not run by celebrities. In my personal experience, people in 12-step programs are fairly narcissistic. It goes with the addiction. And yes, I'm including myself in there. So if you have a room of self-obsessed people trying to get rid of an addiction, how should they relate to each other? With humility, with egalitarianism, not as celebrities, not as stars, but as people who, regardless of whatever else may be true about them, share a problem that is destroying their lives. In my days of interacting with my preferred 12-step program, I sat in racially mixed rooms, in politically mixed rooms, with corporate finance guys and lesbian feminists. A famous 12-step phrase is principles before personalities, and it's a phrase I've continued to think about even 25 years after my time in those rooms. But what does any of that have to do with all of us? We're not addicts. Our personalities contribute to this church, don't they? Don't we want certain people to be in leadership roles specifically because of their personalities? Don't we honor certain people as stars because they serve on the board and make music and teach the kids? Well, maybe not, especially if we define leadership, as this team has done in recent years, as any work we do intentionally and carefully and thoughtfully and proactively that supports the church. This is a definition that the leadership development team has been trying to get across, as I said, for a couple of years now. And if you accept this definition, it means that virtually all of us here are leaders. And if that's true, then virtually all of us here are stars. Some of us are more visible than others of us. Yes, I'm particularly mindful of this today. Yes, some of us have larger personalities than others of us, for sure. I'm particularly mindful of this today. But we at High Plains are more like 12-step programs that gather in church basements than we might think. Just as everyone who goes to a meeting is part of the solution for everyone else, everyone who comes to church here and volunteers in any capacity is part of what makes High Plains great. Leadership is not about being a celebrity or a star here. It's about the visible work and the invisible. And once you count the work we all do, it becomes impossible to say who the stars are, because there's no way to say who the stars aren't. Expect resurrection. Most people who find their way to 12-step programs have, as they say, hit bottom. While I was not in AA as such, I occasionally attended their meetings because they were more convenient. At one such meeting, I remember a man in a wheelchair who had damaged his body badly while driving drunk. Once he recovered, he got a car he could drive using only his hands, drove drunk again, and killed an entire family. And yet, years later when I met him, he was clean and sober, his eyes alight. He had a good job and a family of his own. We youths tend not to believe in resurrection, but I think it is not over-dramatizing the situation to say that this man had been resurrected. He had been emotionally and spiritually dead, and now was emotionally and spiritually alive. Another 12-step phrase I've heard, in fact, is we specialize in resurrection. It may take a lot of work to get there, but it's possible. What about us? I'm not talking about Easter services, where we may lean one year toward an interesting interpretation of Jesus and another year toward nature's rebirth in spring. I'm talking about whether we come here at less than our best and grow emotionally and spiritually toward wholeness and wellness as a result of our involvement with High Plains. Some people, in fact, get here with substantial wounds as a result of growing up in a toxic religion. They need healing. Part of that healing might include emerging from a religiously shut down space into the open air of Unitarian Universalism. And it may not always look like the more dramatic resurrections of 12-step programs where someone truly lost finds their way back. But we have our resurrections. So where does leadership come into this? For me, it's the other word in the pair, the expectation of resurrections. Leadership in general is about expectations, about having them, about inviting others to have them, and then live up to them so expectations become reality. And when each of us is a leader here at High Plains, no matter the capacity, people will be resurrected. When we all lead in building a beautiful, welcoming community, newcomers are resurrected from their loneliness, and not only newcomers. When we all lead in educating ourselves and each other, we are resurrected into new intellectual freedom. When we all lead in playing roles in transformative worship services, whether from up here, over there, or out there, we are resurrected from boredom into joy and hope and commitment. When we lead the church toward justice, which we do in so many ways, we don't merely resurrect ourselves as individuals or a church community. We resurrect the world. So may we be a congregation of leaders, not stars, and may we expect resurrection and then bring it to pass day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year. Amen.
One of the core tenets of AA is to share your story. Early Christians and even today's Christians share their stories of salvation. Sharing their stories helps them stay strong in their faith, and it holds them accountable to one another. AA is all about sharing their stories. Why? Because each and every one of us has a personal story to share. And your story, be it of struggle or of triumph, can be an inspiration to someone else. Sharing a personal story can be a profound experience for the storyteller as well as for those hearing it. Stories about our personal experience can promote our own awareness, stretch our hearts, and help us to heal. Telling your story can help you connect with your own emotions. In addition to connecting to your own emotions, your story has the power to awaken in others their own potential, opening them up to new possibilities, revealing the common threads and journeys of the human experience. By summoning the courage to reveal ourselves to others, we provide comfort to others facing similar challenges while reducing our own sense of isolation, as well as theirs. After all, we all stand on the same earth, we breathe the same air, and we share the same language. One of the things that High Plains does to encourage us in sharing our own stories is our small group ministries. We share so much about each other and our stories in these groups. If you are not yet a part of one of the UU groups, I encourage you to look into them. They are a wonderful way to share your story and to hear about other people's stories here at High Plains. By sharing your journey, you can shine a reassuring light on the path ahead and help people see that they are not alone. In sharing our stories with each other, we can learn how to navigate, change, move forward, and face each new day with renewed courage and compassion. Experienced AA practitioners are wise enough not to begin by demanding beliefs. They work on thoughts, attitudes, relationships, and habits. They believe the root of the problem is not in the thinking, it's in the drinking. They often never even talk about drinking at their meetings. Instead, they focus on change. They talk about freedom from fears, surrender of resentment, cultivation of goodwill, and helping others. By listening to each other, by sharing their stories, members pick up fragments of truth that can affect a transformative change in their lives. But how does that apply to High Plains? We all have stories about struggles, but we also have stories about joy. Stories can be about finding your spiritual home and what that means to you, what it has meant in your life. What's your story? How did you come to be here at High Plains? What does it mean to you to be a member of High Plains? Telling someone about how you came to be here and what keeps you coming back, talking about what High Plains speaks to, how High Plains speaks to you, can make other people feel welcome, like they belong here. Maybe they thought they were on this journey alone, but through your story, they will find they have kindred spirits here. Most of you have heard my story many times, but since I'm here, I'll tell you again. My mother was a devout Christian. She couldn't understand how I couldn't believe, and I couldn't understand how she could. I went to church with her many times, and other churches as well, but I almost always left feeling angry, or at the very least disconnected. To put it mildly, I didn't like the way it made me feel. A friend was visiting one day from out of town, and I was lamenting the fact that I really wanted to find a church. And We talked for a while and she asked me what I was looking for. Therein lied the problem. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew what I didn't want. I didn't want someone telling me what I should believe or how I should think or feel. After some more conversation, she said, well, isn't that like Unitarian or Universalist? And I was like, I don't know, I've never heard of either one. So we looked it up, first in the dictionary and then online. It seemed to make sense, so I checked it out. My first visit to U Church was when we were over on Brookside in what is now Freaky's Tattoo Parlor. From the minute beautiful Betty Davis walked over and welcomed me, I felt at home. I had never had a church home before, and it felt really, really good. A lot has changed for High Plains since then, and for me, but it still feels like home, and I hope it feels that way for you too. Alcoholics Anonymous, at its very core, is a spiritual movement, a faith cure for alcohol. Men and women that have been trying to live without God discover how to live with God. AA is a strictly non-denominational movement. Catholics, Protestants, and Jews are all welcome. There is no particular dogma, and no effort is ever made to win others to a particular faith. AA seeks to be inclusive rather than exclusive. No one is barred by age, sex, race, or creed. They sound very you, don't they? However, they do insist on experiencing God. God is very loosely defined in AA. Each person works on their own concept of God, and it changes as they change and grow. It is a unique concept to believe that there is a God personal to oneself. That is the novelty of AA, that each person is allowed to choose his own concept of God. Again, they sound like you-yous. Generally speaking, most churches put more emphasis on defining God rather than experiencing God. But that should be our goal, not just in church, but in everyday life. Insist on experiencing God. Yeah, I know. That word kind of trips some people up sometimes. So, perhaps it would be better if we changed the language from insist on experiencing God to insist on experiencing the divine. What do we mean by this? Well, for me, I can experience the divine in many ways. I experience the divine when I'm in my garden, whether I'm digging in the dirt and working or just enjoying the magnificent colors of my snapdragons. I experience the divine when we drive up to the mountains or even wandering through the Garden of the Gods, one of my all-time favorite places. I experience the divine at the end of a really long day when I come home and my husband gives me a hug and a kiss and a nice warm bath. But what does it mean for High Plains? I believe that to experience the divine, we must be open. Open to the message, open to each other, and open to love. Now let's be honest, not every service is going to speak to your heart. Not every service is going to touch your soul and make you want to come back for more. However, particularly as a member of the worship team, I kind of hope that there's enough services here that touch your heart and your spirit that makes you want to come back for more. Sometimes, just walking the door and having someone greet me with a smile can be enough to experience the divine. Or listening to Amanda play the piano with all her heart from the very depths of her soul does that for me. Or when we lift our voices in that one perfect hymn that gives me chicken skin. Or when Joe elevates our service with that beautiful butterscotch voice. In those moments, I experience the divine. You took time out of your busy life, out of your busy week to be here. So while you are here, insist, absolutely insist on experiencing the divine in some way, however and whatever that means to you. And don't leave until you do.
Spirit of life and love, we lift up those today who are suffering from pain, whether physical or emotional, whose hearts are broken and whose spirits are stifled, who live with any of the many thousand sorrows of the world. We ache with those who today find joy far from them. We send all in difficulty or struggle our care, compassion, and love. We commit to building a world with less suffering than the world we know. And Spirit of life and love, we join with those who today are celebrating blessings, small and large, whose lives overflow with happiness, who are experiencing any of the many thousand forms of abundance in our world. May their delight remain, and may they be blessings for those around them. When I first read the article from which this service is drawn, I was struck in part by how some of the points of the article spoke to specific issues that High Plains is currently facing. It wasn't just general matters of spiritual growth, as profoundly important as that is. It wasn't just about the power of sharing our stories, though that is something we do as you use in a variety of contexts, from chalice lighting testimonials to small group ministries. So I'd like to reflect on our final 2 points for the day. The first is stick to your primary purpose. The second is focus on the newcomer. Stick to your primary purpose. 12-step programs have a single purpose, which is to get alcoholics and addicts clean and sober and keep them that way, period. There may be a number of steps, 12, that alcoholics and addicts have to go through in order to get and stay clean and sober, but each of the 12 steps plays a role in moving the alcoholic or addict in the right direction. You might make friends in the program, but that's not why you're there, except insofar as making friends helps one get and stay clean and sober. You might develop spiritually in the program, but that's not why you're there, except insofar as developing one's spirituality helps one get and stay clean and sober. You might even drink copious amounts of really bad coffee. But God knows that's not why you're there. Notice that I'm not completing that sentence. You're there to get and stay clean and sober. And because 12-step programs have a single purpose, they're not easily distracted. When they do get distracted, since we're all human, it's easy for members with more recovery time to call the group back to its best self and bring a productive level of focus. Various church groups and organizations have been studying something called the simple church model. Some of you in this room know about this. In Christianity, the simple church model involves eliminating all aspects of church life that do not lead to the development of what some simple church Christians call FDFX, fully devoted followers of Christ. In other words, the Christian simple church model is about making better Christians through a simplified and integrated organizational structure. Does this have something for us? What primary purpose should or could we be sticking to? Some UUs might say that a simple church process is problematic for a religious tradition in which each person might believe something different. But in fact, we as a congregation have agreed to hold certain things in common. Our vision is to build a liberal spiritual community that welcomes all to lives of wholeness. Our mission is to nurture a loving, respectful religious community, inspire spiritual growth, and act for social justice. So today, let's focus on the vision of wholeness. You might even say it's our version of making better Christians. So Sticking to our primary purpose is in part keeping everything that helps us grow toward wholeness and eliminating everything that interferes with such growth. And sticking to our primary purpose means developing leadership across the church that will help us understand exactly how to structure the church for maximization of growth toward wholeness. Wholeness is a complicated matter. There's physical wholeness, emotional wholeness, communal wholeness, spiritual wholeness, and even societal wholeness, which is where we start getting into the social justice piece. So in this way, we are not quite like a 12-step program. What we do is not as straightforward. But I think it's reasonable for all of us to ask, in our capacity as leaders, whether some given thing we do here will or won't have the effect of inviting us into wholeness. If something we do is fun but not productive, or worse, is counterproductive, we need to consider letting it go. And if listening to this, you're thinking, but I don't come here for a primary purpose. I come to see friends and enjoy the worship service, and maybe I do some volunteer work for the church. If that's what you're thinking, if that's what a lot of you are thinking, then maybe the church needs to revisit its vision so that we all have a vision that we all want to hew close to. Focus on the newcomer. In 12-step programs, it's crucial to treat the newcomer as the most important person in the room for several reasons. First, it's often the newcomer who's in the worst shape and who needs immediate support to have any hope of getting clean and sober. Even if they have completely detoxed, they need distraction and direction to keep from using again. But taking care of the newcomer is not only useful to the newcomer, it's also crucial for old-timers who need to keep reminding themselves of what really matters in order to avoid a slip. When an old-timer sees a newcomer at a meeting, the former can think, there but for the grace of this program, go I. Focusing on the newcomer in 12-step programs enables both newcomers and old-timers to transform in a healthy direction. We at High Plains also should focus on our newcomers, and for a variety of reasons. Focusing on them can get them integrated here, helping them to feel welcome and starting their journey with the church. Newcomers to High Plains may in fact be coming from toxic religious experiences, and we may have both hope and detoxifying strategies to offer them. Focusing on newcomers can also help us push against a tendency we sometimes have to make fellowship a matter of hanging out with our longtime friends, taking the easy route rather than working to meet and get to know new people, guilty as charged. Even the people who have been here the longest may eventually leave if a job or retirement takes them to another part of the country or world. If we focus well on the newcomers, they may become our old-timers given a chance. And finally, there's a reason we should focus on our newcomers that has nothing to do with 12-step programs, but a lot to do with our developmental goals. When we medium-timers or old-timers focus on the newcomers with church leadership in mind, we are more likely to meet the developmental goals of deepening the church community, engaging in outreach, doing social justice work, and raising the funds that we need so badly to be the church we could be. As just one example, about half of the social justice team is now made up of relative newcomers, one of whom is team lead. Every newcomer is one more person through the door to be blessed and to offer blessings. We owe them our dedicated attention. Some of us are them. All of us were them at some point. If all of us can be church leaders regardless of our titles, we owe it to both the church and our newcomers to cultivate them as leaders, as those who carefully, thoughtfully, proactively make High Plains the best it can be. We are not a 12-step program, nor do we have one in the modulars. but because we are always open to learning new things from new sources, I hope that some of you will leave today's service intrigued by these ideas and ready to keep finding ways to improve this liberal religious community that we call home. Amen. Our benediction today comes from UU Minister John Brigham. Go your ways, knowing not the answers to all things, yet seeking always the answer to one more thing than you know. Amen. And please join me in our closing affirmation.
Nurtured by this community, inspired by all that we share, may our actions carry this love forward into our lives and into the world every day.